Since you're going to be part of this conversation, I just want to start with seeing a little bit of where you stand on this big question. So if you all take out your phones and either go to the app or to slido.com, you can see where to find it on the menu of the VivaTech app, which is pretty cool, by the way. It has lots of cool features. And I'd like to ask you the first question about your own experience with cryptocurrency, just so that we know if you're big crypto fans, if you're cryptophobes, so that we know who is debating with us here. Yeah, so far you're not very active in this survey. Go on, vote. OK, we're going to need more engagement than this in order to keep this discussion alive. So please, 7 of you have already voted. Wi-Fi is, 3G. If you came from Europe, roaming is free, huh? 11 of you have voted. OK, so far I see that... No, on the contrary. No, sorry, it's going to be a hard... Yeah, indeed. Indeed. Guy-Philippe is going to take the conservative approach, if I can call it this way, alerting us, and you will take the more optimistic approach. So I think the audience, at least 42% of them... I'll give you a microphone in a second, but you can already hold each a mic. That's not a bad idea. So the way we're going to do it... OK, I would say there's an audience that actually is quite well split. They know a thing or two about cryptocurrencies. They've already have used it themselves. They're not necessarily convinced.
But I would like to try, and I have
no. We have 44% who have not but would like to try, and we have 40%.
So you have actually 80% that want to try. You have actually 80% that would like to try, and also who have and probably will do in the future. So I have 80% of the floor for you somehow.
It's good. It's good.
OK, let's keep the excuses for the end.
Yeah, well, I'm checking them.
OK, so this was just a fun warm-up question so that you know how to find the app and Slido. I suggest we go to the real question that we have today, which is the same question we're going to ask the two panelists. Do you think cryptocurrencies brought the financial system forward or backwards? In other words, positive or negative effect? Obviously, we're simplifying. Obviously, there's a bit of both. But we'd like to see what you feel was more the case. We're not projecting so much about the future, which we don't know. We're asking more about the situation today and the past.
Yeah. I have 0 on the...
But it's not necessarily bad news, because we are going to compare the results after your debate, and we'll see if they've changed their minds. So the fact that most of them are pro-crypto...
Yeah, I'm trying to...
OK, I mean, I would assume that by the time you're done, we're also going to have a bigger audience, so that might also change a little bit. OK, so the way it's going to work, you will each get 4 minutes to present your positions. 4 minutes and not a second more. Yes. And then I will interrupt you. And then we will have 8 minutes of discussion, of questions, for which I will rely on you as well. We're going to try to take as many of your questions to the two of them during the 8 minutes of discussion. And then you will each get 3 minutes to conclude. And then we will ask the same question once again and see if the audience has changed its mind. I'm looking for Aline to flip a coin. Where is Aline? Or we just take a decision. Can we have a volunteer with a coin to flip to see who starts?
I have a Bitcoin if you need one.
You have a Bitcoin. Can you flip your Bitcoin?
I could flip it.
OK, we're going to say that you are... I don't know if you can do heads and tails with euros. It's really meant for dollars. We don't have... no, we do have a face. So you're heads, and you will be tails. Yeah, that didn't go that well, huh? Which one? Up. That's the heads.
That's a head, so...
That was you.
All right, so I start.
All right, so wait, before you start, let's give him 4 minutes to explain to us why we should all be afraid of cryptocurrencies.
May I start?
Go.
All right, so delighted to be here, and I'm quite unfortunate actually to take that position that I believe that cryptocurrency actually are taking us somehow backward so far. And I would of course insist on the so far because in general I'm all for innovation and experimentation, but I'll just explain why on that particular topic of crypto this is dangerous. First thing is that we were sold that cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin and so forth, would be unbreakable instruments of monetary exchange. And indeed, when you look at in the communication, the transfer of money, it's quite unbreakable. But the problem, as usual, as we see actually in other means of transfer and communication, the issue is at the endpoint. And on top of that, the endpoint today are the cryptocurrency exchanges. So far, we have had about $1.7 billion worth of Bitcoin that had been hacked. So I'd say for an unbreakable instruments of exchange, that's not quite doing the job so far. And there are, of course, 4 other reasons why we do have problem and inefficiencies with cryptocurrencies. The second one is the energy issue. It's quite inefficient as in terms of energy used. So far, estimations by guys from PwC Netherlands would put that the use of energy by cryptocurrency is about the amount of what is being used by Switzerland. Switzerland is about 8 million people, so about. We believe that there are about 7 million active wallet users, all right? So actually, if the whole population of the world were using what we have so far as a technology, it would probably double the amount of energy, electrical use. And that is just absolutely non-sustainable. A third point is that even as an asset class to invest, by itself, it is not properly diversified, and thus it's quite inefficient. Because when I mention the issue about Bitcoin, people will tell me, yes, but you have Ethereum, you have all sorts of other type of currencies. The problem is that when you look actually at the mass of cryptocurrency being used, about 62% is Bitcoin. And actually, when you look at the top 3 or top 5 currencies, you reach at about 85% of all the actual value being used. And on top of that, there are huge correlation in the different fluctuations of all the cryptocurrencies. That is, all the other cryptocurrencies are correlated 70 to 85% to Bitcoin. I'm going a bit quickly because I don't have much time. And now I'll get to actually the heart of why it's dangerous. Especially when you look at a currency as indeed an instrument being used by whole nations. The key thing that we've learned with the 99 crisis is that we always need to favor activity and labor rather than the savers. And to do that, and that's been the big lesson of the 1929 crisis and the big lessons of all financial crises, we need to have currencies that are going to slowly suffer from inflation, that the value will slowly be debased. Why? Because if you believe that the currency unit you own is going to increase in value in the future, then you're going to hoard your currency. You're going to wait to expense it. And if everybody does that, if everybody waits to expense, then you have actually collapse of economy. And that's why Bitcoin and all the cryptocurrencies are extremely dangerous to be used, especially since we're talking about financial instruments, which is one of the few things that you have to be very careful when you do experimentation, because you don't want to have another financial crisis to happen. And you need to do that in a very limited sandbox.
And thank you, Guy-Philippe, for your 4 minutes. Let's give him a round of applause for defending why this is dangerous. Your 4 minutes for explaining to us why it is the way forward start now.
Thank you so much. So, first of all, I should say I'm a huge believer in globalization. And I actually believe that everyone in the world should have the same possibilities.
Just hold it closer.
And that doesn't matter whether you're from France, whether you're from Denmark, whether you're from US, or from any other country in the world, or you might not even have a citizenship. So if you look at crypto, that's inherently the money of the future. It's basically global money. And what actually happened 10 years ago when crypto were invented were that 2 billion people got their first bank account. That's the 2 billion people who don't have identity in the world. And because they don't have identity, they don't have access to the financial system. So that's actually a problem that got solved 10 years ago. What further got solved like 5 years ago with the innovation of Ethereum were basically that everyone in the world got access to financial instruments, all kinds of financial instruments, like hedging, futures, access to private equity, and so on. And that's something that people today have access to that, but that's basically high net individuals in US, so it's like around 1 million people worldwide who have access to this. But with crypto, you don't need a third party, you actually have access to it directly. And now the skepticists, they will probably say, well, but this is dangerous. If you don't have identities, we don't know whether we are like financing terrorists, doing terrorist financing, or whether we are like supporting child abuse material and so on. But one of the very cool things about crypto is its inherent transparency. And it's actually interesting if you talk about the financial crisis that one happened like in 2009 and around that time. One of the reactions against the crisis were actually crypto. And many would say, well, we want more anonymity and we want less transparency. But that's actually not the case. Because crypto is more transparent. And if you look at the financial crisis, it was actually lack of information of the underlying financial system that caused the crisis. And if you look at crypto, you have everything written so everyone can actually read it. And you say, if you then look at crypto, it looks like the Matrix screensaver, which it actually isn't. If you use the right tools, if you have access to the right data, you can actually know a lot about where the money flows around in the world. You can know whether there's capital flight out of China, whether there's capital flight out of India, where there's concentration of funds in certain European countries and so on. And all that is public data. You can analyze and you can look at it. I should also add to the kind of legend around a belief that it's going to use all the power we have available in the world. If I have fruit flies in my bin back home, they grow exponentially. And if they would continue to grow that way for just a couple of months, the entire world will be fruit flies, basically. So we all know that's going to stop. And it stopped because of innovation. So if everyone in the world is using crypto, well, we all know that technology will evolve and technology will enable this, so the energy consumption will go down. At the same time, energy consumption for crypto is not bound to transportation of energy. So you can actually put miners at location where energy is cheap, where it's basically free energy. That's the same what happened with aluminum production, where you put an aluminum plant on top of geothermal energy, and you basically just ship in and out aluminum, which makes it not really that hard for the environment, because it's basically using free energy that way. Also, going back to the 90s and the probably the early 2000s, the first stories back then were every time you do a Google search, you use the same energy as a cup of coffee. And this is not scalable, it will just die. And it's 20 years ago, and we still have the internet, and most of it actually runs on renewable energy. So I don't really believe in that argument.
5.
I'm
4.
good.
You're
I don't
good.
need to say more.
All right, thank you very much for this more optimistic approach. We now have 8 minutes for a discussion, and I see that your questions are flowing in. I advise that we try to keep the questions more about the negative or positive aspects. I'd like to start by picking up on the fact that both of you referred to the financial crisis. I find it very interesting that, to some extent, cryptocurrencies are the result of the financial crisis, and people who don't believe anymore in the institutions, who think that they did not do their job correctly and there's an alternative market that can do it better. At the same time, Guy-Philippe, you were saying that it encourages people to keep their money in their pockets, and that could generate another, or you will correct me in a moment, but I'd like to ask you a different question. If a financial crisis hits now, are we better equipped now than we were 11 years ago, given the fact that we have cryptocurrencies?
Absolutely not.
Or are we worse? And
No
just maybe to finish the discussion, so on the one hand, we see the role of governments and banks that did not do their job back then, but now we have less regulation to maybe prepare ourselves for the next.
No, we don't. That's a totally different topic, by the way. It's an issue of how much regulation we have with the banking system, and I would totally agree that we still have huge issues with banking system. Just the one thing I would add is that cryptocurrency, which to me, and I'm not the only one, Bank of America, of investment banks, but also a couple of central banks do think the same, are still speculative instruments. So to me, right now, it's just adding an additional speculative layer to the ongoing speculation that still exists on private debt. And on top of that, what
But is speculation available for everyone? Not just you, it's available for the masses. It's global. Everyone can access this. So you have speculators that would be like...
Can everybody access it? Is it really available to anyone?
It is available. Everyone who has access to a phone can buy it.
You don't think there are barriers about the level of knowledge, level of...
But that would go for anything. It's definitely lower barriers. You don't have like actual red tape around it. So red tape exists in the existing financial system. There's a lot of speculation there, and you can speculate in all kinds of things. The red tape is not in crypto. You can always access crypto.
Just add to that, yes, speculation is actually available to all, which is a big issue and a big danger, and that's why we need regulation. The largest speculation actually crunched the world and helped the rise of far-right populism is what happened in the US market with speculation on housing, fueled by mortgage, that is private debt issued by banks without the proper regulation to people who could not hold that debt. And one thing that really scared the hell out of me 1.5 years ago is when I saw a couple of French small savers starting to invest in Bitcoins. And I was thinking to myself, if we do have another craze like that, we're going to crunch a whole class of small little guys, and then who we're going to vote for when the money is going to crash down?
So the only alternative they have is playing online poker. So today you can choose between online poker, because that's accessible for everyone, or you can choose to crypto. And I would any day advocate that I would pick crypto or online gambling. And actually, if you look at small savers around the world that enters this, for example, in Asia, there's a huge appetite for financial entertainment in different ways, and they have a budget for that. They would put aside, and they would gamble on anything. And gambling on crypto is a way better bet than putting the money in online.
Gambling on crypto is still gambling, by the way, and that also can be regulated, all right? And there are different ways to regulate, and different markets where you can regulate gambling.
How do you regulate for 2 billion people without IDs?
No, you can regulate in the way you communicate about gambling.
But you can't regulate if they don't have an ID. They're not.
Let me stop you there, because regulation is indeed a very big question, and that's speculating about what may happen in the future. But we're trying to keep the discussion about what's happened so far and what was the positive and negative effect so far. And you spoke about speculation, and I'd like to push it a bit further about the fluctuation of the currencies. So when it comes to empowerment of people who don't have access to financial services, does the fact that now it fluctuates make them stronger because they can bet on it and maybe rise from poverty, or does it put them at risk that today it's worth something and tomorrow it's worthless?
It's a weak instrument to store value because it can be hacked at the cryptocurrency exchanges, and because, as we see, there's a huge fluctuation because actually it is still understood as a speculative instrument. Why people buy Bitcoins or Ethereum? Because they want the currency value to grow. And by definition, that doesn't make a currency. A currency is something which is run by eggheads, central bankers, that are going to identify how much liquidity you have in the economy so that it's going to fuel activity, not saving, not rents.
So I obviously completely disagree with that.
In a Scandinavian way.
I just enjoyed your enthusiasm around that. And I would definitely say, so what you see here is, again, inclusion. You see a lot of people who didn't have access to invest in anything before. I don't want to prevent them from investing in something. Today we have these laws around and regulation around high-net individuals. That's the only one who can own private equity, because the system is simply too expensive to protect them in any other way. So we just keep them out. In crypto, everyone have the access there, so the actual burden is on education. We basically need to educate people to look after their money in the right way, because of course there will be bad guys trying to cheat money out of people. That will always happen, and we can't really avoid that. What we can do is to take a very elitist approach and say, well, I'm going to save it here, I'm going to save it in France, I'm going to save them in Denmark, I'm going to save them in small countries. But the 2 billion people in the world who doesn't really have a state to look over them, they'll not be saved.
I don't want it in France in current standing. And I'll make that argument, which I can hear. We need to experiment in technology, and that's true. And it's great that we have different new means of storing value, and that is great. But I'll say one thing. There are 3 areas where experimentation is dangerous. Military systems, because it can kill.
I would agree to that.
Healthcare, because it could kill, and that's why whenever, well, you're going to disagree with the FDA process that you need phase 0, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, whenever you're going to put and launch a drug. I disagree on that. And the third point is speculative instruments, because it can destroy societies and lead to the rise of far
I
right.
think societies will do just fine with speculative.
No.
It's doing fine so far.
Let's let Michael answer now.
It's been doing fine so far.
Absolutely
I
not.
think like we have seen a lot of people getting wealthy on crypto. I think that's amazing. We have seen people without access to money being able to send money back home. We've seen money being saved by people doing remittance, sending money from US back home to their company, to like their relatives in Philippines, in Indonesia, and so on. We've seen like huge benefits of crypto. And I think
we have-
of course
wait,
they will.
wait,
I have to
you'll see
respond.
different
I'm sorry.
crypto
have
I'm
minutes at the
sorry.
end,
I'm sorry.
but
I
you
have to
have-
respond
you
to
have
that.
the wire.
I'm very
I love
sorry.
it. I
have
was
the
afraid
wire
you would agree
system.
and we'd
No,
have
no,
just
no.
perfect harmony, but we...
Yeah, exactly.
That did not
Perfect
happen.
harmony.
That didn't happen. No.
Wait,
So
we
if you
have
look
1 minute
look at the
left,
steps
and
from
I
the
see that
crypto
the question,
exchange.
because I
I think we
promised,
should
I
address
promised
that.
the
This is a
audience.
very-
Okay, go. Answer.
Just
Give one
one key
sentence.
point. One key point. It's important one. There's one thing which is killing the technology environment, and that is the rise of far right. May it be Trump in the US or far right, actually in populism in Europe. And one key element, and really it's a very important one. There's one huge study, important one, made by three German political scientists 3 years ago that demonstrated that any type of crisis does not lead to the rise of far right, except
Okay.
crisis. Now it's an important one.
Crypto
you
is
will
not
keep
Crisis
far
it- you will
right.
keep it for your
led by-
conclusion.
Crypto is not far
Crisis
right.
led
That's
by
inclusion for
private
people
debt.
without money.
Okay. Let's keep that for the conclusions. I just saw that the popular questions, the audience is very pragmatic, is more about the future. I feel like I need to separate the two of you. It's only cryptocurrencies. We're going to be fine. Well, the questions coming from the audience are most about what's going to make cryptocurrencies mainstream. So I know we agreed when we discussed this topic that we're going to look more at what's happened so far, less on the future, but we're out of time. I just want a quick thought of each of you. What's going to be, well, from your perspective, what would make it kosher and legitimate? And from your perspective, what is still missing to make us really in an even more, well, what would make it mainstream? You are already optimistic about where it's going, but maybe what would give it the push that it needs to become an everyday transaction money? And I'm keeping you to really a few sentences. You then get 3 sentences for 3 minutes for conclusions.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's-
Can I start?
Should
You want to go?
I can go first, yeah. So basically, I think what's missing in crypto today is basically, when I looked at the screen before, I could see a lot of you don't hold crypto. And you should start doing that. That makes it mainstream. So the more people actually holding crypto and start using it and so on, that would be pushed in the right direction. And also think about it this way, when you buy crypto, you support money that's available for everyone, not just for an elitist group in here.
So critical mass. More people
Critical
use it,
mass,
the more,
more
it becomes
usage, yeah.
mainstream. Okay, what is missing for you?
So two things. If it's
Very quickly, because we're out of time.
If it's a speculative instrument, make it restricted to only a certain class of investors. I'm sorry to say about that. And if we want to make it a currency, have a governance of crypto set up by economists, not by a set rule that, for example, with Bitcoin limits to an actual 21 millions of Bitcoins being issued. Have economists like central banks that are going to run crypto,
this
and
is
then I will
This
buy
is a
it.
strange argument. This is not how the world functions. You can't say, let's do it by economists. We set it up in another way. That's
Central
not how it
banks
works.
are that.
Before I get fired by VivaTech, you see these people over there are getting stressed that we're running out of time. So we each get 3 minutes now, uninterrupted, to conclude your arguments, and then we will survey the audience again. There are more people now in the audience. 3 minutes.
3 minutes?
3 minutes each.
Wow.
Yeah, I think we should probably cut off a little bit of your 3 minutes. Who wants to start? 3 minutes, and then it's over.
Okay, should I go first? I can take.
Yeah,
Okay,
3 minutes.
I can take those.
Yeah.
So basically, I think we heard a lot of interesting arguments now against crypto. I also think, so basically I think that the interesting arguments against crypto is mainly concerns. Concerns that this will be dangerous for people. Let's protect them. Let's remove their freedom rights of buying the crypto. It's dangerous because it could get hacked. Yes, we have like similar situations with wires. We had a huge case where $80 million was stolen from a bank in India, and they were actually sent out with wire transfers, and the only thing that stopped it were like random mistakes on the wires, essentially. Otherwise, it would have been billions. So the existing financial system is also vulnerable, and money is being stolen out of banks every day. Also, we see the existing system where money laundering is a huge issue. We had, like, in the Nordic countries recently, several billions of dollars being laundered to a few banks. So it's there. We have, like, huge risk in its existing financial system. So just calling out the risk in crypto is simply wrong. You could say about people holding money instead of using them. If you actually look at the money moving around in crypto, it's huge sums. We see actually billions being processed every week in crypto. It's a lot of money that moves around in that system today. And you should compare that because, again, a lot of people don't need crypto. None of you in here probably need it today because you can use wires, there'll be other alternatives, you can use PayPal, you can use a lot of other instruments that you have if you already have a credit card. But if you don't have access to that, you only have access to crypto. And that means that the money being moved around should also reflect that there's a lot of people without access that actually contributes to these movements. And that just means there's a lot of popularity here.
1 minute.
So, other things around concerns about use for thefts, hacks, and other things, I would say our company, CHAINALYSIS, is actually mitigating those risks in many ways. So we keep data on the blockchain and can actually see how the money moves around. And we can, for example, help law enforcement with proper oversight so they can mitigate those risks. So I would say that today there's perfect tools available to actually mitigate the risks in crypto. And that should actually just enable all of you to go further into crypto and go long in crypto.
Wow, even ahead of time. Perfect.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
3 minutes to conclude. Yes? 3 minutes to conclude, starting.
Well, the funny thing is that, in a sense, I fully agree with some of the goals and objectives of Michael. That is, we need, don't play out too much. That we need to offer as much potential instruments to as many people as possible. But the argument that the current system is fucked up, and it is fucked up, is not a reason to add an additional layer that is also fucked up, so that we're going to double fucked up.
4 F words in 2 sentences.
That's true.
Pretty impressive.
I know, but you wanted me to be a bit active. All right. And I'll be very frank about that, because what is really at stake is actually the defense of our technology ecosystem. We are being attacked by a populist revolution that comes from people who are, I'm sorry to repeat myself, fucked up. And they were because... Sorry. And they were because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, a class of people in the US could accede to a speculative instrument, which were actually mortgage, which was sold as a AAA type of instrument. And then you had millions of small savers, people with low to middle income, who had access to what was actually speculation to housing. And they lost it, and it created the crisis where we are now. And to come to tell me that it's all right that we can give that instrument that actually is speculative, and that's an important point, to anyone, I say no. No to small savers, no to low to middle income people, no to people who don't understand risk. Because again, and that's the heart of the argument, so far, crypto are not currencies. Crypto are speculative instruments, and that's why people invest in crypto, because they want the value to grow. And that's precisely why it cannot be a currency.
1 minute.
Because modern currency are run by economists who think about currency to do one very important thing in the economy, something we learned after 1929, to inject liquidity in the economy when we have crisis. Something that few people know, but Ben Bernanke, the former governor of the Fed, in a way saved our global economy by injecting 5 times the monetary mass in the US economy after 2008, 2009, 2010. And that's why somehow we didn't have a depression, but just a hard recession. And so that's why I really want to stress the importance of having an economy run not by set rules, but by smart economists with flexible view and that understand that the most important thing is not to save money, but to save employment, to save activity, and to save technology.
What vitamins do you take to have so much energy in the morning?
Only double espresso.
I'm on my 3rd espresso
Right
and
there.
I'm nowhere near where you are. Okay, that was very passionate and interesting, I have to say. What we're going to do now is ask the same question we asked before, so please all go back to your phones. I saw your questions. I tried to bring as many as possible to this debate. Next time we should have maybe 18 minutes and at 8 for the Q&A. Can we have the same question and see how you feel now after this discussion? And we will try to compare the before and after and see if some of you might have changed your minds. Yes, suspense. Come on, vote, people. Take your phones. It's easy. It's either on the app or on slido.com. It's not complicated. There's Wi-Fi. There's free roaming in Europe. It won't be funny if you don't vote. I'm almost begging.
You start.
Okay, let's give it a few more minutes or a few more seconds.
Backward. That's interesting.
What was it before?
It's 5% backward. How much on the forward level?
I can't remember the number there.
Well, we're going to compare in a second the before and after, but let's see if it still changes. Okay, so we have a vast majority which is still in favor on cryptocurrencies. I hate to break it to you, my dear friend.
It's still, but
Guy.
move from, if I may.
Yes,
if I may,
you may.
How many people have been able to convince?
Okay, that we'll check in a second. But to begin with, we have an audience which is more or less believing in cryptocurrencies. I'm assuming that they all have, they're all invested, so they're hoping also that it's going to go well.
I understand them.
You understand? Katerina, can we see what it was before? So this is, so before it was 63, and now it's 48.
Got a little bit there. It always helps to say populist.
Okay, in any case, we were pushing both of them to take the extreme positions on this debate. Obviously, it's a complicated, microphone, we don't hear what you're saying.
No,
but in any case...
Just an exchange.
Michael
was telling me, in a way, I was doing a bit of a good win argument. That if we don't do good, we're going to get the Nazis. But unfortunately, it's a bit true. And really one thing, and people can make up their mind, but go to one study made by Schularek and Funk, 2015, 800 elections in the Western world from 1870 to 2014. Fantastic. And you will learn stuff I've learned incredible.
And then we continue to the next debate. Thank you so much to the two of you.